Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Mike Norvell, Florida State, coming out of spring practice. Sounds like they have wrapped up their spring transfer portal window additions. Where does this roster sit going into 2025? Many of y'all know this by now. This is one of my favorite off-season episodes to do. One, because I get to learn from you guys in the comment section. Y'all let it fly when we start talking about depth chart predictions. But I think just as importantly, it gives us a chance to take a bird's eye view approach to this football team and say, hey, what do we like going into 2025? What do we still have question marks about? I got a couple hot takes that I'm going to start this episode out with. I'm sure, like many Florida State fans, have some hot takes as well. Y'all let it fly in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. To the Florida State fans, been fun talking this team during spring ball. Been fun breaking down the spring transfer portal window additions. Cannot thank you guys enough for rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it now. Starting at the top, at the quarterback position, I don't think there's a question mark going into 2025. Tommy Castellanos going to be your quarterback one. He's a guy that, both Gus Malzahn and Mike Norvell kind of handpicked in terms of, hey, who do we want running this offense in 2025? Thomas Castellanos was that answer. I've been very vocal that, look, he's not going to be a top 10 NFL draft pick, but he's a guy that fits what Florida State wants to do on offense. That's important. I mean, you go back to DJU last year, it's like that was a weird fit. Obviously, DJU did not play very good football for Florida State. Sometimes it's more important to get the fit right than the player right. And I think Florida State has a good fit going into 2025. Now, quick note on the quarterback room, Kevin Sperry. I'm not sure how much we're going to see of this kid as a true freshman. Generated a ton of buzz during spring practice. And look, you rarely hear true freshman quarterbacks who are early enrollees generate a ton of buzz unless they add 5 stars next to their name, unless they're competing for a starting job in spring practice. And Kevin Sperry ain't competing for a job. He got a lot of buzz during spring practice. And then you start looking at, hey, how does Mike Norvell make it work at Florida State? It is the young talent getting developed in this program. And Kevin Sperry is a name that, again, not sure how much we'll get to see of this kid in 2025. Very excited to see if he takes the field and where he is as a quarterback for Florida State. Because if you're asking me, like, all right, if Florida State gets back to where they belong under Mike Norvell, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Kevin Sperry running the Florida State offense over the next couple of years. Wide receiver position. I'll start with, my hot take, and that is Javon Boggs is going to start for Florida State. Generated a lot of buzz in spring. And now look, to me, Javon Boggs is a different kind of freshman wide receiver than a guy like Hakeem Williams. Right? Hakeem Williams was ranked well above Javon Boggs coming out of high school. But the reason Hakeem Williams was ranked so highly was the potential he had, not what he was as a football player at the moment coming out of high school. Javon Boggs kind of a polar opposite. He's not going to be a guy that makes your jaw drop when he walks into a room, not a guy that 6'4", runs 10.7 in the 100-meter dash. Go back to his high school film. Really good football player. And that's not to sell Javon Boggs short in terms of the potential he has as a pass catcher. I'm just saying that this kid coming out of high school was a favorite wide receiver of mine in the 2025 cycle, not because he was dripping with physical traits. It was because this kid is a polished wide receiver that understands how to create separation, has a very diverse route tree. I mean, it sounded like he was one of the best wide receivers that Florida State had in spring practice. Him, Javon Boggs, along with a guy like Tayshaun Gelsey, I think they're going to play for Florida State a lot in the 2025 year. Now, the other two wide receivers, Deuce, Squirrel White, the biggest difference with this Florida State wide receiver room as opposed to what we saw in 2024 is there's actually guys that we know what they are. Like Deuce Robinson, we've seen him play solid. I think there's another couple of levels that this kid can play at in 2025, but we know solid power 4 pass catcher at the very least. Very similar conversation for Squirrel White. Like where we were 12 months ago, we had a bunch of guys we were excited about, but nobody had really contributed at the power 4 level to date. This wide receiver room, it has the potential. It has guys like Deuce Robinson or Elijah Moore, a guy like Tayshawn, BJ Gibson. It has guys that we're excited about, but it also has guys that, hey, we know they can play at the power four level, which is something we didn't have last year in the wide receiver room. Running back room, real quick. I think you landed your running back one with Gavin Sawchuk, and I think Usman Kramoa comes in and it is probably a top 3 back on this football team. I know that's another probably hot take, and that's not necessarily a shot at Roydell Williams or a guy like Cam Davis or a couple other talented running backs in this room. Guess the way I'm coming from it, the kind of reading the tea leaves, I don't think they would have gone out and gotten Gavin Sawchuk if they saw enough from some of the running backs on this roster. I think the reason they went out and grabbed Gavin from Oklahoma is, one, he's a really good football player. Number two, we're still looking for that running back one. I think the 2 top running backs on this roster might be guys that are coming in through the summer. That's Gavin Sawchuk coming from Oklahoma and Usman Kramoa coming in as a freshman. Usman Kramoa was probably my favorite running back coming out of 2025. I think he has the ability to come in immediately and be a difference maker. And look, we know Florida State's going to try to run the football a lot with Gus Malzahn. Tight end position, I'm going to give the nod to Randy Pittman. He's obviously familiar with Gus Malzahn and what he wants to do on offense. He's also probably the most well-rounded tight end on the roster. Landon Thomas is going to play. Now, how good is Landon Thomas going to be is one of those very intriguing storylines for Florida State, but the film we've seen from Randy Pittman, knowing he can get it done as an inline blocker to the necessary extent in this Gus Malzahn offense allows me to give Randy Pittman the nod. I'd be fired up to see a little bit more Landon Thomas in 2025. Offensive line, like a healthy Florida State offensive line, we know what it's going to look like. Gunner at left tackle, Adrian at guard, Luke Petitbaum at center, Richie Leonard at guard, Micah Pettis at right tackle. The thing that stands out to me about this unit is, although it's 4 new names coming into the program, this offensive line has played a ton. It might be the most experienced offensive line in the country. Now, I have not run the numbers with a bunch of other programs across the country, but I look at this offensive line and say Gunnar Hansen, 2,100 snaps in the SEC at left tackle. Micah Pettis on the right side, another 2,100 snaps in the SEC as a right tackle. Luke Petitbaum with 1,600 snaps. Adrian Medley with 1,300 snaps. Richie Leonard the fourth, 1,400 snaps. I mean, it's well over 1,000 snaps that this offensive line collectively has played at the Power 4 level. The 2 questions I have for this unit is, number one, does it come together as a unit? That's sometimes the tricky part about having 4 new faces and you start an offensive line. Does it come together as a unit, especially with some of these guys missing spring practice with injuries? And then secondly is just the depth. Like, what happens when Florida State has to reshuffle the deck? Do we have enough guys in our 2 deep that we trust to play quality football in 2025? Ideally for Florida State fans, we don't have to find out that answer. Ideally, we stay healthy up front. But if we do we have enough guys we trust on the offensive line? Look, I think there's a much higher floor within this Florida State offense than there was last year. Last year, we love to talk about the ceiling. Like, what happens if DJU puts it together? What happens if Malik Benson puts it together on the outside? We kind of ignored that there was a lot of question marks on this offense. This year, going into 2025, I feel like there's a much more solid floor for this offense than we saw 12 months ago in 2024. Defensive side of the football, I want to start with this. New defense coordinator, Tony White, a guy that I have tremendous amount of respect for coming from Nebraska. Let's start on the defensive line. Similar to how we talked about the wide receiver room, there are a little bit more known commodities. Like, my question here for Florida State is, who's going to step up and be the difference maker for this defensive line? I look at Deonta McCray from Western Kentucky. I look at DeMonte Diggs from Coastal Carolina. Solid football players that fit what Florida State wants to do on the defensive front, but probably not going to be first-team All-ACC guys. Can Darrell Jackson be that guy. Like if there's anybody I'm picking to be that guy, it's Darryl Jackson, because the potential that this kid has, you just look at him walk into a room, that can be a first round NFL draft pick. We just got to see this kid put it together and kind of match what he looks like to a football player on the field. What about James Williams? Elite pass rush juice. Is he good enough to play the run at a high enough level? Amari Williams at the jack linebacker spot, like coming off the edge, there's some real potential there. Y'all know how I feel about Kevin Wynn as a freshman. Like, is he, the other question is, hey, are we deep enough? That question probably depends on a guy like KJ Sampson, a guy like Kevin Wynn. Like, how many snaps do we trust these young kids to play in 2025? Are we deep enough? And do we have some difference makers? Like that's the question that I have in terms of this Florida State defensive line. Linebacker room. It sounds like Florida State really likes what they have with Elijah Herring. A guy that we've seen play at the SEC level at Tennessee, plays solid football, has played a lot at the off-ball linebacker position. To me, it sounds like Omar Graham might be putting it together, which I think should excite a lot of Florida State fans. And here's the thing I'll say with the linebacker room. You got better coaches. Like I had felt like the linebacker room the last couple of years, just especially in 2024, they just didn't seem like they knew what they were doing. Like Tony White has a background coaching linebackers. Can you just get, and again, I don't think this linebacker room is going to be like the best linebacker room in the ACC. I think the question for a lot of Florida State fans is, can it not be a liability like it was in 2024? You go back to the 2024 year, there were a lot of problems with this Florida State team. I ain't breaking news there. You saw opposing offenses attack linebackers in this Florida State defense because they weren't quite the athletes you needed, and they just didn't really know what they were doing. Back in the secondary, Florida State went to the portal and grabbed Jeremiah Wilson, who's one of the better cornerbacks, not only in the portal in the spring, but really could be one of the better cornerbacks in the ACC. I don't think it's a coincidence that Florida State did not go and look to add anybody else. Maybe there was a couple of safeties that's wrong, because they did bring in Jarvis Boatwright from USC. Maybe there's some question marks at safety because you saw Florida State kick around a few safeties in the spring portal window. This is the one position on the football team that I feel like Florida State has adequately recruited and adequately developed. And so there's kind of an underlying confidence, especially adding Jeremiah Wilson, that this secondary should be pretty dang good. We'll kind of see and try to make sure that happens in 2025. But I think the secondary should be good because you have enough talent and you develop players at a high enough level where, I think this unit should be good, which quite frankly hasn't taken place in the other parts of this Florida State roster. It's one of the hardest teams to get a feel for in 2025. I'm holding back my optimism just because of what we saw in 2024, but there are some reasons to believe in this team going into 2025. We like some things about this roster. We have some question marks about this roster. Going to be a really fun fall camp. Going to be really fun to see how this team rebounds from the 2024 season. Florida State fans, y'all let it fly in the comment section. I'm sure plenty of y'all have some takes and have some problems with my depth chart. That's the beauty of doing it. Please let it fly. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.